What in the world are these people thinking about?
Well, they say, look, these are a declaration and an outline of our priorities. And when I called them today, Lou, they said I was the first phone call they had received literally since the deal was first signed. So people are not paying attention, and they're letting them, in fact, get away with this.
You know, I was asked the other day about whether or not I really thought the American people had the stomach to stand up and stop this nonsense, this direction from a group of elites in absolute contravention of our law, of our Constitution, every national value. And I hope, I pray that I'm right when I said yes. But this is beyond belief. Bill Tucker, thank you very much. It brings us to the subject of our poll tonight. Do you think maybe somebody should take a vote if we're going to merge the United States with Canada and Mexico? Maybe, you know, people like you and me vote. Yes or no? Please cast your vote at LouDobbs.com. We'll have the results here later in the broadcast. Coming up, a measure to raise
for a
wages
new world order, a one world government, and how do we stop it?
Well, I think even our first President Bush said that the New World Order was in tune, and that's what they were working for. The UN is part of that government. They're working right now very significantly for a North American Union. That's why there's a lot of people in Washington that don't care too much about our borders. They have a philosophic belief that national sovereignty is not important. It's also the reason I have made very strong suggestion that we need not be in the United Nations for our national security.
What do you think about our borders and the immigration policy?
Our borders have been totally neglected. We worry more about the borders between North and South Korea and between Iraq and Syria than we do about our own. Absolutely. Just recently, a bunch of our border guards were picked up and sent and enticed to go over to Iraq. It's insane. I mean, we should have more border guards, and the only way you can afford it and get the personnel is bring our troops home. Worry about ourselves. We don't even have the money to finance this world empire that we operate under. We have to borrow almost $3 billion a day just to pay for the war and our extravagance. And we borrow it from none other than China and Japan. I mean, we don't even have enough wealth produced in this country to finance the amount of spending that we have. And it will come to an end, and I think most Americans realize it. Middle-class Americans and poor Americans have already suffered the consequences. Their standard of living has already started down. Those who are doing well know deep down in their heart they're doing it on borrowed money. And that is going to come to an end. It's also the reason I emphasize the importance of sound money. If you allow governments, anytime throughout all of history, to print money, they always print too much and they destroy the money. Yeah. Our dollar is worth 4 cents of what it was when the Federal Reserve was created.
Is going into December, January, so that might be the reverse of the dollar fall. Apart from that, I think one thing people who are dollar-based need to focus on is the Amero. That's the one thing that nobody's talking about that I think is going to have a big impact on everybody's life in Canada, the U.S., and Mexico. If you Google it, you'll find out all about it.
Well, you could tell us a little bit more right now.
You always hear it on CNBC. The Amero is the proposed new currency for the North American community, which is being developed right now between Canada, the U.S., and Mexico to make a borderless community, much like the EU, and the dollar, Canadian dollar, U.S. dollar, and the Mexican peso replaced by the Amero.
You really think that will get any leeway?
You may want to visit a couple of websites and see how far along it is. The Canadians are pretty upset about it, whereas the Americans, apart from the Texans, are the only people who know anything about it. The rest of the public's really sort of with their head in the sand on this one.
Okay, interesting. I mean, we've already got NAFTA, the free trade zone, isn't it? I mean, is that working? Is that doing enough?
Well, I'll tell you what, it's created a lot of illegal immigrants coming across the border. I don't know. You get the pros and cons on this thing. NAFTA, for some people, is a very good thing. For other people, it's been a disaster. And I think this is one way that the politicians are trying to work themselves out of what potentially could be a disastrous situation going forward.
Meanwhile, in Washington today, the Supreme Court took up a landmark case, a case that could decide for the first time ever whether the Second Amendment guarantees Americans the right to own a gun. There are about 283 million firearms in the United States, 40% of them handguns. The court is being asked to decide whether banning handguns violates the Constitution. Wyatt Andrews now on this historic court battle.
It's the biggest case on the right to bear arms ever heard by the Supreme Court.
I've got the case. I pull it out.
And it was brought by a group of District of Columbia residents who complain they've been denied their constitutional right to own guns.
It is unloaded now.
Jillian St. Lawrence and other D.C. residents are not allowed to own handguns, period, and shotguns which are allowed have to be kept unloaded and trigger-locked.
What's wrong with that?
Well, our Constitution gives us a Second Amendment right to, at the very least, defend ourselves in our own homes.
The issue is whether the Second Amendment grants an individual right to bear arms. The language says the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed, but the line just above indicates the people involved are part of a well-regulated militia. Many scholars argue the amendment was only about militias. D.C. defends its gun restrictions as crucial to reducing violent crime.
This is a public safety case. Handguns represent a disproportionate number of crimes in the District of Columbia.
In court, most of the justices seem to favor individual rights to own guns, with the Chief Justice challenging the idea guns are only for militias.
If it is limited to state militias, why would they say the right of the people?
The Chief Justice also asked how residents fumbling with a locked shotgun can defend themselves in the middle of the night.
Then you turn on the lamp, you pick up your reading glasses. It may not matter, but I'd like some idea about how long it takes.
It took me 3 seconds. I'm not kidding. It's not that difficult.
But other justices asked if D.C. has the right to fight crime by restricting guns.
Is it unreasonable for a city with that high crime rate to say no handguns here?
The justices seem to be looking for a kind of balance, a way to strike down the D.C. gun ban without striking down all gun control laws, and to finally declare once and for all a constitutional right to own a gun. Wyatt Andrews, CBS News at the Supreme Court.
But first, doesn't it kind of feel to anybody else like history is repeating itself? The economy feels like, I don't know, spring of 1929, and the debate over your gun rights feels like 1939. That's the last time the Supreme Court addressed the constitutional right to bear arms. That is, until yesterday, when the court heard oral arguments surrounding the D.C. handgun ban. Now, to me, and hundreds, thousands of others, there's no question our founding fathers believed in responsible gun ownership and constitutionally guaranteed that right in explicit terms. They weren't doing it for hunters. They were afraid of big government. Too bad Washington, D.C. seems to have forgotten the whole Constitution thing. Maybe we should move the Constitution to someplace where they might read it once in a while, like, I don't know, in the congressional bathrooms or something. Since 1976, the District of Columbia has banned all handgun ownership except for retired D.C. police officers. The district also requires other firearms, like simple rifles, to be kept disassembled or with trigger locks on. Keep in mind, only lawful citizens obey the gun ban. Criminals, I haven't had a problem with, ignoring it. For decades, D.C. has been the capital for gun crime. This case has both sides of the gun debate holding their collective breath. The court's decision will certainly have a national impact. So far, the justices have repeatedly suggested that Washington's sweeping gun ban infringes on our right to keep and bear arms. In fact, in the words of Chief Justice John Roberts, what's reasonable about a total ban on gun possession? I, for one, couldn't agree more. Wayne LaPierre is the Executive Vice President of the National Rifle Association, an organization I am proudly a lifetime member of, and he was in court and heard the oral arguments yesterday. How did you come away feeling yesterday, Wayne?
Glenn, I came away with what I went in. All human society is best served by good people being able to defend themselves against those that would do evil to them and hurt them.